and coming out. Hey everyone, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. As often happens with this show, I'm so fortunate that when a guest comes on and has a good experience, which I hope happens to every guest, they often recommend other guests, people that I might not have heard of if I wasn't doing this daily show. Today's guest is TJ Waterfall. He is broadcasting from England. He is a registered sports nutritionist, and he's going to be talking about how to optimize your plant-based sports nutrition. Please welcome him to the show. It's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. So first question, what is a registered sports nutritionist as opposed to, I guess, a regular sports nutritionist?
Well, so you can be registered through various different organizations. Here in the UK, I'd say that the top sort of register of nutritionists is the Association for Nutrition. And then we also have the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register. So I'm a member of both of those. And it means to become a member, you have to submit loads of evidence showing that you're qualified and experienced and that you practice evidence-based, science-backed sports nutrition. So I had to submit big portfolios. It took like a week to go through the whole process. So it's quite rigorous. But yeah, so registered with both of those. And yeah, I just like that my clients know that the advice that I give them will always be evidence-based and supported by the science. That's the most important thing, really.
Nice. Well, you're plant-based, correct?
Correct, yes.
I'd love to know how you first heard of the plant-based diet, how long you've been enjoying one, and what made you make the switch.
Well, I went plant-based. First, I went vegetarian. That was about 8 years ago. A year or so after that, I ditched dairy and eggs and went fully vegan, plant-based. And that was actually before I studied nutrition. So I made that switch. It's on ethical grounds, actually. It was to do with animal welfare and the environment. The more I learned about it, the more I just couldn't ignore all of that. And shortly after that, I went on to study nutrition and realized that all of the science and data and evidence shows that it's actually an incredibly healthy way to live and to eat. And that's how I went on to then work with athletes and yeah, help them with their sports nutrition, optimize their performance. So yeah, it was on ethical grounds first, and then I went on to learn more about it from the nutrition side. And now it's, of course, there's still the ethical considerations, but I love sharing with people the science behind how beneficial it can be, because I think that resonates with a lot of people too.
Where did you study nutrition?
I went to UCL, University College London. It's currently in one of the top 10 universities in the world. So it was a full-time master's degree. It was clinical and public health nutrition. So really in depth, broad range of topics, all to do with evidence-based nutrition. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a great course.
Is that what you wanted to do even before you became plant-based?
I didn't know what I wanted to do, to be honest. I did my undergraduate degree. That was in human nutrition and human biology and psychology. And when I chose that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I was into health and biology and science and how the body works, but back then I didn't know that it was specifically nutrition that I wanted to get into. But then, yeah, this opportunity to study for this master's degree came up, and I realized that it's my calling.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you have a book?
I do. Yes. Yeah. I wrote a book during lockdown, actually. It's published with Penguin, and it's called the Plant-Based Power Plan. And it's all about helping people to thrive on their plant-based diet. So that's both in terms of health and also in terms of performance and recovery. And yeah, so nowadays I work with a lot of elite plant-based athletes. So I work with football, or I should say soccer players, international soccer players and rugby players, and some UK Olympic athletes as well. And just really wanted to share some of the advice and tips and strategies that I use with these elite athletes, so that hopefully lots of people could benefit from those. Because I think lots of people are aware of the potential benefits of a plant-based diet now, both in terms of health and performance, but lots of people aren't sure what to do next and how to really optimize their nutrition and, you know, achieve peak performance. So that's what the book's all about, is to help them to sort of guide them through the next steps and make sure that they're achieving their optimal performance.
Nice. Here, I got a question from a live viewer, Dina. What do you enjoy doing for exercise?
I've always enjoyed team sports. So at school, I played lots of rugby and football. And yeah, so I kind of still enjoy those. I'd say most of the exercise I do now is kind of weight training. I also really love running and cycling. I did my first triathlon earlier this year, which I really enjoyed. I think I'd quite like to get into those. Maybe do some longer distance one, maybe an Ironman or half Ironman. So yeah, kind of solo sports, team sports, everything really. I'm not any good at any of them, but I can hold my own in lots of different sports, and I quite enjoy that, because I can chop and change and do whatever I enjoy the most at that time.
You happen to watch Ted Lasso, and is it as popular in England as it is in the United States?
I did watch it, but I don't think it's that popular here. Is it big in the?
Oh my God! It won every award 2 years in a row. It's very it's a wonderful show, and it's very popular, but not so much in the UK, huh?
No, we've watched it, and a few of our friends have, but no, I don't know that many people who have seen it here.
It looks like your book is out already in England, but for the United States, it won't be out until January. Is that correct?
No, it is out in the States as well. Yeah.
Maybe it says January 1st, 2022 when I click on it.
Oh, right. Which website are you on?
Amazon.
On Amazon. Okay.
Was it hardcover first, and maybe this is the paperback version?
Oh, or maybe the other way around. I think you might be looking at the hardback cover, but yeah, it is available on Amazon, and it's also available on Kindle, and I recorded the audio, so it's on Audible.
Oh, that's great. I love listening to books. I love doing Audible. Are all the elite athletes, or all the clients you have, are they all plant-based, or is that not a prerequisite to work with them?
It's not a prerequisite, but if they're not plant-based, then I tend to sort of point them in the direction of someone else who might be better in that area of sports nutrition. But my focus is on plant-based nutrition. So pretty much everyone who works with me is plant-based. Maybe they're not when they first come to me, but they're hoping to transition to a plant-based diet. So I'll kind of guide them through that process as well. But people usually come to me because they know I specialize in plant-based nutrition. So yeah, most of them are.
Nice. Where did you first hear about the plant-based diet, and what was your transition like?
So to be honest, I've always loved animals. It's that terrible sort of cliche that I've always loved animals, but I used to eat them. And I guess I learned more and more about it through my friends, through documentaries. One of my friends actually studied zoology at university, and he used to come and tell me all sorts of stories and kind of quite daunting information, which really made me question my diet. So yeah, it kind of built on from that. And yeah, I went vegetarian first. I think I made a pretty common mistake of going from an omnivorous diet to a vegetarian diet, and I replaced where I would have had meat in my diet or in my meals with most meals with cheese or eggs. And actually, it didn't do me any good. Cheese is very high in saturated fat. If anything, that it could be worse for your health than the meat. So I think the point where I felt the most benefits was switching from a vegetarian to a fully plant-based diet. So yeah, that was how the sort of process worked. I was vegetarian for about a year before making the switch to a fully plant-based diet.
It's interesting how so many people, dairy is the last thing to give up.
It is. I think it's, for a lot of people, it's the hardest thing to give up. I know I speak to a lot of people and they say, yeah, I'm almost plant-based, but I just can't kick the cheese.
That's because cheese is addictive, because it's got all those casomorphines and such.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly it. Yeah, you hit it there. So yeah, but like you said, it's actually, you know, it could be one of the worst things for you. It's so high in saturated fat, usually very high in salt. It's got the casomorphines, and yeah, so it's almost a bit of a it's quite funny, really, that, you know, lots of people are moving to a plant-based diet but still eat cheese, and that's the last thing to go. It was the case with me as well. I guess it's just when you're used to something as well, it just you know, it can be a habit that's hard to kick, I guess.
Yeah. Well, take the salt out of cheese, and people don't really like it very much. They've tried. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think about you're familiar with Dr. Doug Lisle?
I'm not sure.
He wrote the book, The Pleasure Trap.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, he always talks about how in nature you never were meant to to activate salt, sugar, and fat pathway at the same time, and that's what processed food is for the most part in cheese. It's the salt and the fat combination. But like you say, take the salt out, and people aren't that interested in the cheese. Take the fat out, and they're not that much interested either.
Yeah, then it's just salty. Yeah, exactly.
Mandy asks, are you interested in ever doing an ultra marathon?
I would love to. And actually, until about a couple of years ago, I should say throughout school, I really enjoyed running, and I was in the cross country team. I ran track. I did 800 and 1500 meter for my school. I ran that for my county as well. So I was really into running when I was at school. And then I had a few sort of recurring injuries. I had IT band, so a problem with my knee, plantar fasciitis, so a problem with my foot and my heel. But actually now, it's only the last year or so that, touch wood, I seem to be completely injury-free. So I'm signed up to a half marathon. I don't want to sort of overdo it straight away, but hopefully the half marathon will go well. Then I'd like to sign up to a full marathon, and then I'd love to do ultras. I've always just been scared because I've just been worried about the injuries and whether it might bring back a recurring injury. But I think if I build up slowly, it's something I'd really love to do. Yeah.
Mandy says, do you find that certain sports attract more plant-based people than others?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. So soccer, I keep forgetting, football is a very different sport for you guys. Soccer is, there's a lot of plant-based soccer players. In the UK, we've got what's known as the Premier League. It's like the top tier of soccer. And there's a few, really high-profile soccer players who are plant-based. There's some sports which are way behind, conversely. So rugby is one here, and I think it's quite sort of cultural that rugby players are, big, butch, masculine, I get in inverted commas there, masculine men, and they eat lots of meat and dairy and cheese, and they drink lots of beer. I think that is slowly starting to change, and I have worked with a number of rugby players now, but I think that's definitely behind the curve compared to soccer players, for sure.
Nice. Let's see. Here's a question from Bullion, who's been on the show. Are you friends with any vegan activists in England like Ed Winters or Paul Curtin?
No, I don't know either of them personally. I do know lots of people who are vegan activists. Maybe not quite as well known as those guys. But yeah, I love watching Ed Winters, Battling Ed. He's so eloquent and calm when he speaks. And yeah, I think it's, they're doing a great job in spreading the message.
Nice. Do you work with people just in person, or do you also work with them virtually?
Actually, I work with most people virtually now, because I used to live in London in the UK, and I would see people face to face there. But we actually moved to the southwest of England, so we're kind of in the countryside now. And yeah, most of the time I see people over video call. It's so, to be honest, the whole pandemic hasn't really changed much, because I was doing most things over video call anyway. So yeah, it seems to work well, and it's great because it means I can work with people. I've had a number of clients from the States and in Australia as well. So the time zones and traveling, we can make it work now.
That's cool. Let's see. Lisa's asking the $1 million question. What do you tell athletes who think they can't get enough protein from a plant-based diet?
I say there's two very common misconceptions. And the first one is that people tend to massively overestimate how much protein they need. And the second one is that people massively underestimate how much protein is in whole plant foods. And of course, there's the high protein foods that most people are aware of, like beans, lentils, chickpeas, tofu, tempeh, seitan, nuts and seeds. But actually, there's loads of protein even in things like grains and even vegetables. So it's, firstly, people don't need to be having as much protein as they often think. And secondly, people are actually already having a lot of protein and they're not aware of it.
Interesting. Yeah. Have you read that book, Proteinaholic?
I haven't read it, but I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So how does a plant-based diet help people optimize their performance?
Well, it can help in a whole load of different ways. So a key one is recovery. And when it comes to sports nutrition, recovery is like the holy grail of sports nutrition. It's important. Recovery is really important for endurance-based athletes, but also strength-based training as well. And most people see a significantly improved recovery efficiency and recovery time. And that's largely thanks to the higher antioxidant intake of a plant-based diet. On average, plant-based foods have 64 times the antioxidative properties compared to animal-based foods. And that's really important for recovery. And it's not something that can be replicated by taking antioxidant supplements. And in fact, studies show that taking antioxidant supplements can have the opposite effect. It can actually impede recovery. So it's something that you can't take shortcuts. You can't just take antioxidant supplements. It has to be from eating whole plant foods. And obviously, if you're on a plant-based diet, you tend to be eating more plant foods, obviously. That same antioxidant intake can actually help during performance as well. It's not just recovery, but many studies show that having a higher antioxidant intake can help during performance. And again, that can help with both power and endurance-based exercise. At the same time, you're reducing your intake of potentially detrimental compounds in animal-based products, which can have pro-inflammatory effects. So things like saturated fat and cholesterol, heme iron, high levels of choline, which can lead to TMAO, trimethylamine N-oxide production. Most athletes see an improvement in their circulation, and that's thanks to the higher intake of nitrates, dietary nitrates, and also flavonols. And that means that muscles receive more oxygen and they receive more fuel when they need it most, which is during exercise. So that can increase exercise efficiency. It can extend the time to fatigue. So that can help in endurance-based sports and high-intensity sports. I can go on. Shall I carry on?
Sure. It sounds good to me, even for somebody that's not an athlete.
Yeah, right. I mean, all of these things will improve your health as well. If you improve your circulation, that's great for your overall health as well as your performance. So yeah, your blood rheology improves when you move to a plant-based diet. And blood rheology, that's a measure of the sort of the viscosity of your blood. So how thick it is, basically. And studies have shown that switching to a plant-based diet, your blood rheology improves within just 6 weeks. What else? Oh, your gut health. So this one is a huge one. Studies show that people on a plant-based diet have quite a distinct gut profile compared to people on an omnivorous diet. So they tend to have a far greater number of healthy gut bacteria and a far greater diversity of healthy gut bacteria as well. And they tend to have far fewer pathogenic or bad gut bugs. And that's really important because our gut health, our gut microbiome, it helps us to break down the carbohydrates and lipids and proteins in our diet so we can use those for fuel and recovery. They help to produce important vitamins for us. So studies show that, this is really interesting, about half of our vitamin K requirement is actually produced and provided for by our gut bacteria, not directly from the foods that we eat, which is amazing. And another key group of compounds that our gut bugs make for us are known as short chain fatty acids. So they are propionate, butyrate, and acetate. And these are incredibly healthy compounds that they improve the health of our gut, but they also enter into our circulation and they improve the health of almost every system within our body. So they can help regulate our fat metabolism, they help regulate our appetite, and they can reduce the risk of obesity. They help support a healthy immune system, and they suppress inflammation in the intestine and in other organs as well. They even interact with certain genes, and by doing that, they can reduce cholesterol production. So they can reduce the risk of heart disease as well. And there's even good research now showing links between these short chain fatty acids produced by our gut bugs and our mental health. So yeah, gut health is a huge area that can be really influential, both in terms of our health, but also our performance and recovery. So there's so many different areas. There's circulation, gut health, antioxidant intake. All of these areas can lead to significant improvements in our performance and recovery.
Great, thank you. Mandy,
sorry, that's quite a long answer.
Well, no, but it's a good one. Mandy wants to know, who is your book for? Is it for everybody? Is it mostly for people that are athletes, people that want to be more athletic?
It's actually for everybody. So it's, I use some of the same tips and strategies that I use with elite plant-based sports people. But those strategies can definitely be applied to anyone who's interested in health and exercise. So people like me and my friends who certainly aren't elite athletes, but we enjoy exercising and want to get the most out of it. Those principles can, they still apply to everyone who exercises and wants to kind of improve their health. So yeah, it's for men and women, all levels of ability. There's information in there for endurance-based athletes, but also for more sort of strength and power-based athletes as well. So I like to think it's for everyone, really.
Nice. Let's see if we have any more. Oh, here we go. What do you use for fueling a long distance race like a triathlon? Whole foods like dates?
Well, yes, the triathlon I did this year, I definitely used dates. I put a big emphasis on carbohydrate loading before the race as well. So that's really important. And yeah, during the race, I had some sports gels, I had some dates, some homemade oat bars that I made. And also I made a sports drink, a homemade sports drink, which I can tell you about if you like.
I'd love to know. I bet it's healthier than Gatorade, and it's probably not blue.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm going to convince you that it's better than any sort of pre-made sports drink that you can buy. So, and it's really, really simple. It is grape juice. Grape juice has loads of research behind it in terms of its performance enhancing effects, and that's thanks to its antioxidant levels. The only thing with grape juice is that it has between about 12 and 14% carbohydrates, which is a little bit too high for a sports drink. The ideal level for a sports drink should be about 6 to 8% carbohydrates. Anything higher than that, and it can just be a little bit difficult to digest, while you're in the event. So it's grape juice mixed about 50-50 with water. And if you're making a litre of that, then about half a teaspoon of salt. In the US, all of your table salt is iodized, I believe. In the UK, it's not. So if you want iodized salt, you have to make a conscious effort to go and, sorry, I'm just gonna have a glass of water, my throat's drying up slightly, sorry. So yeah, it's grape juice mixed about 50-50 with water, half a teaspoon of salt. So that's providing the perfect ratio of carbohydrates. It's about 6-8% carbohydrates, which is brilliant. It's hydrating. It's got all of the antioxidants in the grapes. You're providing electrolytes with the salt. Obviously, that's providing sodium. There's potassium naturally in the grapes already. And it's got none of the artificial colors or sweeteners or any of those sort of additives that you find in Gatorade as well. So it's a really great sport drink.
That's terrific. What do you eat for a day, for example?
Say that again, sorry.
What do you eat for a day? People love to know what our guests eat. Like, can maybe take us through a day of eating for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a real foodie and I really enjoy food. I always have done. So actually my my daily diet it changes lots from day to day because I like experiencing different foods from around the world. I like sort of Indian cuisine, East Asian cuisine, South American, European. I like lots of different foods. So there's no sort of typical day for me, but I could maybe tell you about today as an example. So I had muesli for breakfast. So that's whole grain oats. There's barley and rye flakes in there as well. Lots of nuts and seeds and dried fruit. And I had oat milk with that. And I had some fresh berries. So there was some raspberries and blueberries. Actually, I had soup for lunch. So there was it was a homemade soup. There was kale, cannellini beans, tomato, onion, carrot, celery. So in that soup alone, there was probably 4 or 5 portions of vegetables, which is great. Really high in protein, thanks to the beans. I haven't had my dinner yet. It's about 7:30 p.m. here, but we've got a stir fry for tonight. So we're going to have loads of veggies, probably rice with that, tofu. So yeah, that's a typical day for us, I guess. But like I said, it varies a lot. Sometimes we'll have Indian curries. Sometimes we'll have burritos. I spend a bit of time as a chef, and I like kind of pushing the boundaries with the food, really, and having cuisine from every country in the world, making like really nice, vibrant vegan versions of it.
Well, I'm looking at your Instagram and you've got sushi, you've got a sweet spiced rhubarb that looks delicious, but especially what looks amazing is the stack of pancakes.
Yeah, those pancakes are 3 ingredients. It's just bananas, oats, and soy milk. So simple.
Yeah, but you decorated it so beautifully with fruit and looks amazing.
There's fruit and yogurt. Yeah. We love that. That's the kind of breakfast we might have on a weekend when we've got a little bit more time. Weekdays are usually quite rushed with us. We've got a daughter who's 2.5. So we're usually getting her ready, getting ourselves ready. So it's usually a bit rushed during the week.
That's neat. How do you work with people on Zoom though? Because don't you need to see their form kind of when you're training somebody?
Well, I'm not really training them. So, I'm not a trainer. I'm just a nutritionist.
I see.
I have studied human biology, so I know quite a lot about physiology and anatomy. But yeah, I'm not really working with them on a physical basis. It's more, we'll do various blood works and food diaries. So it's a bit more sort of less physical, I guess, in that sense.
I get it. Okay. Forgive me. I thought maybe you did a little bit of that as well because you work with so many athletes.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I would consider doing in the future because I do love exercise. And I think obviously those two aspects would complement each other quite well. But I guess, the training is so sports specific. So perhaps if I did that, I would have to choose just one sport to focus on. And I think already being a plant-based sports nutritionist is already fairly niche. So if I'm a plant-based soccer sports nutritionist, that's even more niche then.
And then a plant-based goalie soccer sports. You can get even more specific. How do you know David Goldman?
I sent him a copy of my book actually when it came out, and he since then we've kind of been messaging, and he loved the book, which was really nice to hear because I really look up to him as a nutritionist.
That's fabulous. I mean, he's very nice. So Olson is saying, so can you build muscle while being vegan? Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of the most common questions I get, and the answer is yes. You really, really can. Like I said earlier, there's the two common misconceptions are how much protein you need is often overestimated. How much protein we actually eat is often underestimated. So you can work out how much protein you need based on the kind of exercise that you're doing and based on your weight as well. So if you're an endurance-based athlete, the optimal amount of protein is around 1.2 multiplied by your weight in kilograms per day. That's if you're an endurance-based athlete. If you are a strength-based athlete, going up to about 1.6 times your body weight in kilograms per day has been shown to be optimal. Excuse me. So I can use myself as an example if you like. So I weigh about 80 kilograms. If I was a strength training athlete, I would multiply my weight by 1.6. That gives me 128. And 128 grams of protein is actually very easy to achieve on a plant-based diet. And that's before you even start looking at protein supplements. You can easily reach 128 grams of protein naturally through whole foods. There's a really interesting meta-analysis. So this big review study that combined the results from, it was 49 individual randomized controlled trials looking at this very question. And this meta-analysis, it combined all of these results, and it showed that, yes, of course, increasing your protein intake helps with putting on muscle mass if you're strength training, but going above that 1.6 level made no further difference. So yes, increasing your protein intake up to a point does help, but going much beyond that, it's not going to help you anymore. Of course, some people having a bit more than that is helpful. And remember, this was based on averages. So, if you're a bodybuilder or a power lifter, then perhaps going up to 2 times your body weight in kilograms. In some extreme circumstances, people with very low body fat percentages who are doing, really high volume strength training work, then maybe even going up to 2.2 might be optimal. But for most people, if you're strength training, about 1.6 is the sort of highest optimal level. And that's very easy to achieve on a plant-based diet.
Nice. Mandy says, why do you think it's a good idea to keep a diary?
to keep a diary.
Yeah. Did you say that?
Like a food diary, you mean?
Do you think it's a good idea to keep a diary?
I don't think you need to long term. If I'm working with a client, I'll often ask them to do maybe a 3-day food diary or maybe a week. That's useful if you're working with a nutritionist, because it gives me a really good idea of what their current eating habits are, what areas can be improved, what their preferences are, which is important to consider when you're making recommendations for the future. And then also you can track. So, if I work with them again in 4 weeks' time, we can have another look at what changes they've made and what they're eating now. So it's a good point of reference as well. But I don't necessarily recommend doing that long term for your own benefit. Everyone's different. Some people might enjoy doing that, but certainly for me, I would find that quite time consuming. And it might kind of take some of the enjoyment out of eating. For me, like I celebrate my food. I love eating. It's a highlight of my day. And if every time I ate, I had to spend 20 minutes, weighing everything, writing it down, I'd find that quite laborious in the long term. So like I said, it works for some people. If that's you, then great. But yeah, it's not something I'd recommend for everyone.
Great, thank you. Anna says, how does one work with you? And do you work with people in the United States?
I do, yeah. So yeah, I've got my website is called meatfreefitness.co.uk. And through there we can schedule consultations, and they're, like I said earlier, they're done by video call now. I send quite a detailed questionnaire, so it tells me lots of information about your what your goals are, your training, your current eating habits, and I go through all of that in detail before the consultation. And then I guess with US we just have to bear in mind the time difference, so it would be my evening and your morning, but I work with a number of people in the US, so yeah.
That's cool. Here's a question from Clark. What do you think of having oil in whole food plant-based diet? But right there, oil's not a whole food. So, right?
Yeah, it's not. And so you're an advocate of no oil, aren't you? I believe.
Right. I mean, for lots of reasons. I mean, you don't need it. I mean, that's the thing. If you want calories from fat, eat nuts, seeds, and avocado. Why eat a processed food that has no fiber and nutrients? That I don't understand oil, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. For me, I do use a little bit of oil from time to time. For me, it's a balance, because I'm a nutritionist on one hand, but I'm a big, I'm a chef on the other hand, and I guess a traditionally trained chef as well, where oil is a big part of that. And so, it can improve the taste of your food a bit, but I think people often go really overboard with it, and you disagree with that, don't you?
Well, I don't disagree fundamentally, but what I think it does is the reason it is perceived to improve the taste is because of the caloric density. Because the more calorically concentrated a food, the more dopamine is released. So when you add a food that's 4,000 calories a pound, people perceive it as tasting better because they're getting more dopamine. So at the end of the day, when somebody goes oil-free and their taste buds adjust, they don't like oil anymore, because then they can actually really taste the food.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And actually, it's that very same principle with cheese as well. So like I said, I used to really enjoy cheese, and for me, like it is for most people, when transitioning to a plant-based diet, it's one of the most difficult things to kick, and often the last thing to go. But now the thought of eating cheese, or like if I smell it, or if someone is having like a cheese like melted cheese toasty or a pizza nearby, it really does not appeal to me whatsoever. I think it just looks really greasy, and I think it would make me feel awful. So I'm sure the same thing happens when you go no oil for a while.
But also somebody that's young and athletic like you could probably get away with the calories from oil, whereas people that are overweight or older, they can't always afford that calorically in their day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, I'm working with with elite athletes a lot, and often their caloric needs are like 4, 5, 6,000 calories a day. So
I can't imagine. I just can't imagine.
oh yeah, it's
I
quite
mean, they must, in that case, you know, you can make a case for it, but still, even if I could afford that calorically, I would much rather eat, you know, nut butters, tahini, guacamole than just have oil in my food.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I totally agree with that on the whole. I guess that, you know, everyone's different as well with different needs. And like you said, I think, you know, most people are overweight or obese, and most people have the problem that they need to reduce their caloric intake. So definitely for most people, reducing or cutting out oil would be an incredibly, you know, sage advice. Yeah, I guess if you're struggling to maintain your weight and struggling to put on weight and eating 6,000 calories, the volume of food you need, in that situation, you need to make it as calorically dense as possible.
No, I completely agree. Anna says, do you work with teens? She has a 15-year-old that is plant-based doing cross-country track.
Yes, yeah, I do. Yeah, I've worked with a number of teens, and in fact, just on Friday I was working with a teenager. He was 15 as well, actually, but I had a call with his headmaster and his school chef, and we were working all together to devise his nutrition program. So yes, yeah, I do.
Great, thank you. Josh asks, he says, hello, TJ Waterfall. Is it true you can only absorb so much protein, say over a period of 1.5 to 2 hours?
The evidence is very complex on this. So most of the evidence that has been, most of the research that's been done has been done on protein supplements, but actually absorbing protein from a meal is quite different. It takes much longer to digest and break down. So yes, if you were to have, like, you know, a whey protein shake is often what they do the research on, and that was 50 grams of protein, you probably wouldn't absorb all of that. But if you had, you know, a big meal and it had lots of different protein sources in, it would be, it's very different. It's much, it takes much longer to digest, and you'll absorb more of it. It also varies a lot from person to person, and there's also some conflicting data on it as well. So it's difficult to say exactly how much you can absorb in one bolus or one dose. But typically on a whole foods plant-based diet, you're not having more than sort of 40, 50 grams protein tops in most meals anyway.
Manica says, what percentage of people are overweight in your country?
In the UK, it's if for adults, it's 2/3. So it's 2/3 are overweight or obese. We were just discussing this before we started the live chat, weren't we? You know, in the UK, we're not far behind the US.
Yeah. What are you guys eating to make you guys overweight? Is it processed food mostly?
Yes, it's processed food. You know, junk food, McDonald's, KFC. We have all of the you know the US fast food chains here. We have this terrible thing in the UK, which a lot of office workers do, where the supermarkets do these meal deals. I'm not sure if you have that in the States, but you can go to the supermarket and for like £3 buy a sandwich, a chocolate bar, and a fizzy drink. So it's like a meal deal, and a scary amount of people, office workers especially, you know, they just nip out. It's so cheap. There's usually processed meat. It's usually white bread, a chocolate bar, a packet of potato chips, and a fizzy drink. And people are having that every day when they're at work. And it's yeah, that's pretty awful.
Wow. So that's what you guys call soda, fizzy drinks. That's so cute.
Oh, right. Yes.
Soda. I love that. Fizzy drinks. It sounds so much more benign, doesn't it? I'm just going to have a fizzy drink. I love that. That is adorable. That's so cool. So William says, well, what are your thoughts on the possible negative effect of oil on endothelial cells, even if one is an athlete?
So there's, again, the science isn't clear cut on this. And, you know, some oils can provide some omega-3. So cold pressed rapeseed oil can be a source of omega-3 that can actually be quite good for endothelial function. But yeah, there haven't been randomized controlled trials on the effect of oil on sports performance in athletes, so it's difficult to say exactly. But I would suggest that, again, getting the majority of your fats, if not all of your fats, from whole plant foods is, it's always a good option. Just because you're getting so many other nutrients, you'll be getting protein and fiber and antioxidants and all of the other things as well. So yeah, you're kind of, when it comes to the benefits of plant-based diets, for me, it's double benefits, because you're cutting out the potentially detrimental compounds in animal-based products, and you're increasing your intake of these incredibly healthful whole plant foods. So oils, and it's the same if you're having vegan junk food as well, or like vegan meat replacements, those kind of things. Yes, you're avoiding the animal products, so you're getting that benefit, but you're not getting the benefit of increasing your intake of the whole plant foods. So you're kind of missing a trick if you start going down that route.
Yep. Great. Brenda says, what is your opinion on protein powders? My husband uses one for his workouts.
Well, it's a really funny one, because studies show that most athletes, regardless of diet, take sports supplements. So about 80 to 85% of professional athletes take sports supplements, most commonly protein supplements. So it's very common in the world of sports nutrition to take protein supplements. But when a plant-based athlete takes a protein supplement, it becomes a really big deal for some reason. People take that as a sign that you can't get enough protein from your food. But actually, it's if a plant-based athlete is taking a protein supplement, it's for the exact same reason that an omnivorous athlete would take like a whey supplement, for example. It's just a matter of convenience and just topping up that protein intake. It's quite good sort of sports nutrition practice for some people in some circumstances. So they can be a useful tool. And there are luckily now some really great vegan protein powders out there, which use like multiple sources. They might be like rice and hemp and pea protein, for example, like mixed together. Some of them are even fermented. They use fermented protein, so that makes it much easier to digest and increases the absorbability as well. So yeah, I think they can be a legitimate and useful part of a sports person's nutritional regimen in the right context.
Great. Are there particular brands that you recommend, or are they maybe different ones that you get in the UK than we get in the United States?
I'm sure there are some different ones. I actually work with a brand called Vivo, and they do sell in the States as well. And they're brilliant. They third-party test all of their products, which is really reassuring. They third-party test for pesticides and herbicides, those kind of things, and heavy metals. And yeah, they use fermented proteins, so they're really easy on the digestion, and they taste great as well.
Nice. Anna says, do you agree with energy gel before a race?
Yeah, I mean, they can be really useful. They're incredibly light. So, rather than carrying around anything too bulky that's going to weigh you down, they can be, like a really practical tool. I know they're not, completely natural. And if you look at the ingredients, it's mostly sugar, but actually that's kind of what you need when you're running a race. So yeah, they can be useful. Of course, you can do it with whole foods if you carry around trail mix and oat bars, things like that. So it depends what your stance is on that side of things. But yeah, for most athletes, they can be really useful just because they're so light and convenient.
Right. And that, so I mean, I'm sure there's some now with healthier ingredients than back in the day,
Yeah, I imagine so.
because a lot of them
Yeah.
are just pure sugar, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Let's see. I saw a question about what to drink. Oh yeah, here we go from Arlene. During a long event, what do you recommend to drink? Plain water, Gatorade, Tailwind? How do you get enough salt?
Well, so firstly, yeah, I mean, hydration is really, really important during any kind of exercise, but especially longer distance events. If you're racing, if it's kind of an ultra race or anything over about 2 hours, then it becomes particularly important. And that's when you need to start thinking about electrolytes, such as salt, sodium. So I'm not sure if maybe this listener didn't quite catch the earlier bit when I was talking about the sports drink, but you can make your own sports drink. Fruit juice, like grape juice, is great, mixed with water, so it's not too high in carbohydrates, which makes it difficult to digest. Half a teaspoon of salt or so if you're making a liter. If you're a particularly salty sweater, then you might need a little bit more salt. A very sort of simple rudimental test to see if you're a salty sweater is simply if you train in like a dark colored top, do you ever have end up with like white salt lines when the sweat dries off your top? If that does happen to you, then that's a sign that you probably are a salty sweater, so you might need a bit more salt than most people. But yeah, that sports drink is great. It's providing you with the carbohydrates, the antioxidants from the grape juice. It's providing you with sodium and potassium, which is naturally in the grapes. So yeah, you're getting your electrolytes, hydration, and carbohydrates all in one.
Nice question. Do you recommend to sprout seeds and grains for more dense health?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of science now showing the health benefits of sprouting. So, funnily enough, just earlier today, I was teaching a nutrition workshop at this cookery school where I sometimes work, and we were talking about zinc and how to boost zinc absorption, and sprouting is a really great way to do that. So seeds and nuts and grains, they're often quite high in phytates when they're raw. And phytates are the way that seeds store phosphorus, and plants generally need lots of phosphorus when they germinate. So when you soak them, it starts breaking down these phytates because it's getting prepared to germinate. And yeah, if you're having less phytates, it means you absorb the zinc and a few other minerals much more efficiently. So sprouting is very good in that sense. And yeah, compared to like the fully mature plants, say you're sprouting broccoli seeds, for example, the nutrition of those sprouts is much more nutritionally dense than the whole mature broccoli plant. So yeah, it's a really great hobby, and you can just kind of do it on your windowsill if you're into it. So it's quite fun as well.
Yeah, that's great. Here's a question. I understand weight loss is in the kitchen, but do you recommend a certain amount of exercise for weight loss and weight maintenance?
That's one of those questions which is it's so individual. So it's hard to give, broad sweeping advice. For some people, doing 20 minutes 3 times a week is going to be a big deal for them of exercise. For some people, they might be going from 10 hours to 12 hours a week and making a change that way. So it's really, there's no one size fits all answer to that. I guess you could look at the sort of general guidelines, which are kind of set as a minimum for adults to exercise, to maintain health, and to try and maintain a healthy weight, which is, a few hours of exercise a week. And, a good proportion of that should be like weight training, resistance training. So if you're not already doing that, then that would be a really great place to start. But yeah, I'd need to know a lot more about someone before giving them kind of specific advice on how much exercise they need.
Nice. Great. Let's see if there's any more questions. I'm not seeing any more yet. Let's see. Oh, well, this might be too personal, but how old are you? You look very young.
Well, thank you. And whenever people say that, I say it's the plants. But I'm 34. I'm 34. So not that young.
That's still pretty young, if you ask me. Do you find a lot of interest in plant-based eating in England more than before?
Yeah, it's really grown in the last few years, I would say. For me, I've been a plant-based sports nutritionist for 4 or 5 years now. And when the Game Changers came out, the film, interest in plant-based diets for athletes, skyrocketed. So that did a really great job in promoting it amongst athletes. And yeah, I guess like the accessibility of plant-based foods, like any restaurant you go to now will have, at least 1 or 2 plant-based options. So it's getting much easier. I think the benefits are becoming more and more well known. So yeah, it's definitely growing. It's gaining momentum.
You mentioned you'd given a presentation at a culinary school. Is it a plant-based culinary school?
It is, yeah. So where I live, I mentioned earlier that I'm in the southwest of England now. We moved out of London about 4 years ago, and I'm in a city called Bath. And we actually, it's quite a small city. I think there's about 60 or 70,000 people live here. But we have this culinary school called Demuth's Cookery School, and it's the leading vegan cookery school in the whole of the UK. So I'm quite fortunate that I've moved out of London to this relatively small city, but we have this amazing cookery school here.
Maybe you could introduce me to them. Maybe they'd like to be on the show next year. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Helen, who's the head chef there, she's an absolute genius with food and cooking. So yeah, she'd be delighted to talk to you, I'm sure.
That sounds great. Oh, here's a question from Arlene. Where do you get your iron? I'm a vegan ultra runner and my ferritin in the last blood work was a bit low.
Mm-hmm. So iron, there's loads of iron in plant foods. The thing you just need to be sort of mindful of is the absorption of that iron. So really great iron sources are things like pulses. So beans, lentils, chickpeas are fantastic. All of the greens, so any kind of green vegetable is typically a great source of iron. The thing you need to be mindful of is how well you're absorbing that iron. So there's some foods and drinks that can actually inhibit how much iron you absorb. And there's some foods which significantly increase the amount of iron you absorb from your food. So if we start with the things that can inhibit iron absorption, tea and coffee are the main ones. And tea and coffee, that they can be incredibly healthy. They're packed with antioxidants and they're hydrating. There's lots of studies showing the benefits of caffeine in moderation. But if you drink tea and coffee at the same time or around the same time as you're eating, it can significantly reduce how much iron you absorb from your food. So the advice there is not to stop drinking tea and coffee, but to try and have it between meals rather than with your meals. If we look at the other end of the scale, things that can significantly enhance how much iron you absorb from your food, the main one there is vitamin C. So things like smoothies are great because you can get some greens in there. You can also get some vitamin C rich berries or other fruits. So you're getting this really great iron source plus vitamin C, so lots of highly absorbable iron, which is brilliant. Having fruit with as a dessert after your meals can be really good. It's just giving that extra boost of iron. If you're making a salad dressing, perhaps a squeeze of lemon juice in that just to top up the vitamin C is great. And remember, it's not just fruit that's high in vitamin C, but certain vegetables as well. So broccoli is really high in vitamin C. Peppers, like bell peppers, are really high in vitamin C as well. So perhaps if you're having, say, a stir fry, we're having a stir fry tonight, we're going to have some tofu and some kale in there. So lots of iron, but we're also going to throw in some red peppers that are really high in vitamin C. So combining vitamin C with your food can increase iron absorption by around 3 to 4 fold. So it can really significantly help to increase your iron status.
Nice. Dennis says, was it molasses? Something, is molasses good for iron absorption?
Molasses, I don't know about that. I haven't seen any data on it. I haven't looked for any data. So yeah, that would be an interesting one to look up.
Are you familiar with Brendan Brazier's Thrive? And if so, what are your thoughts?
I'm familiar with Brendan Brazier. Is Thrive one of his books?
I believe that's the name of one of his books. Okay.
I haven't read it, but I know lots of people who follow Brendan Brazier and have read one or more of his books and highly recommend them. So yeah, that's all I can say on that. I haven't read it myself yet. So yeah.
Okay, no worries. And have you ever attended the Fruit Festival or other veggie events in the UK?
Yes. So we have lots of vegan festivals around the UK. The biggest one is Veg Fest UK, and that's held in London every year. I think it was cancelled last year because of COVID, but I go to those and I often speak at them as well. So I give talks on plant-based sports nutrition, and they're just a really great place to go and meet like-minded people, eat some really great plant-based food. There's another one called the Vegan Camp Out, which is actually a festival where you go and camp. I think it's a 3-day thing, over the weekend. And I was due to speak there this year, but I was driving up and my car broke down on the way up. So unfortunately, I couldn't make that one. But yeah, we're quite lucky here. Most cities have like a vegan festival every year, which is really cool.
Nice. And let's see, what are your thoughts on using roasted or green coffee beans for athletic performance?
Again, I haven't looked into the data on this. I mean, coffee, like roasted coffee beans, as in like regular coffee, is a potent performance enhancing product. It's known as an ergogenic aid. There's various sort of governing bodies, such as, well, the International Olympic Committee, for example, and the Australian Institute for Sport, the American College of Sports Nutrition. They all have these categorizing systems for categorizing ergogenic aids, which are like performance enhancing sports products. And the top category is reserved for those products which have significant amount of evidence for how effective they are and how safe they are. And there's only like 5 or 6 of these ergogenic aids in the top category, and caffeine is one of those. So it's been proven time and time again in numerous studies to have a significant performance enhancing effect, both in endurance and strength-based sports. So yeah, caffeine can be really helpful. The difference between roasted and green coffee, I'm not too sure about, but caffeine in general can be really helpful. But again, just highlighting the point that it's not one size fits all for everybody. Some people have caffeine and it makes them really anxious and like shaky and jittery. And that's a genetic variation. Some people metabolize caffeine very differently. So if you're someone like that, then having caffeine, those effects of increasing the anxiety and the nerves might completely negate all of the potential benefits. So for some people, it might not be suitable. But if you can cope with coffee quite well, then it can be a really useful tool for improving your performance.
Thank you. Kathy says, what are your thoughts on shakes with non-GMO soy?
With non-GMO soy, it's absolutely fine. So soy products, there's a lot of controversy around soy. But if you look at the best data we have, I mean, most people's main concern around soy are its effects on hormones. And there are meta-analyses showing that soy, even above typical consumption of some Eastern cultures, so having it multiple times a day, does not affect testosterone levels in men. So it can be incredibly healthy, and in fact, there are other meta-analyses showing all of these improved health outcomes. So it can be a very healthy addition to the diet. Both it works in two ways. Firstly, things like tofu and soybeans, they're often used to replace something like meat in the diet. So there's this sort of displacement effect. You're having it instead of meat, which can be pretty bad for you because of the high levels of saturated fat and heme iron and lack of fiber and so on. But there's also direct effects. The isoflavones in tofu can have potent health promoting effects as well. So in a shake form, it's absolutely fine as well.
Thank you. Here is something about cherries. Arlene says, I've read that tart cherry juice helps with recovery and inflammation. Are there herbs that you also recommend?
So tart cherry juice, there is very good evidence that can have both a performance enhancing effect, and it can help to improve recovery. In terms of other herbs, I mean, any herb that you go for, all herbs in general are very amazing sources of antioxidants. So in general, I try to encourage people to use herbs freely as much as they can in their cooking, because they're just such great sources of a whole host of different antioxidants. And the same with spices as well. So things like turmeric, cinnamon, black pepper, all of these things are potent antioxidant properties. So they can all help with recovery too. So just use lots of different herbs. The thing with antioxidants is people often ask, what's the one best food for antioxidants? Or what's the one healthiest food? The answer is there is no one healthiest food. The best thing you can do to help improve overall health and sports performance and recovery is to get as much variation in your diet as possible. The antioxidants found in like orange and red fruits and vegetables are very different to the antioxidants found in purple and dark red fruits and vegetables, which are very different to the ones found in green veg. So, having as much variation as possible in the diet is really key. And it's the same when you're thinking about your herbs and spices as well.
Great, thanks. Do you have a copy of your book to hold up?
I do, yeah. It might be in reverse, or is that the right way around? Yeah, oh good.
That's cute. I love the cover, like bullseye, plant-based nutrition hits the bullseye.
Yeah, and actually I didn't notice straight away, but this it's got like a little stalk out of here, so it's meant to look like an apple. And the arrow has like wheat ears on it as well, so it's very, very plant orientated.
Nice. So here's someone that wants to start running. Do you do consults for that or give any tips? So I work with a lot of runners. Like I said earlier, just on the nutrition side of things, I'm not like a running expert. But yeah, I've worked with lots of runners. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Fiona Oakes. Sure.
Yeah, well, she holds numerous world records for ultra distance running, and she gave a lovely testimonial on the book, which she read. And so yeah, there's lots of information on there in terms of fueling for endurance events. So yeah.
Do you have a favorite plant-based athlete, or just favorite athlete?
I mean, Fiona is incredible. I'm not sure. She's got this documentary called Running for Good, which documented her world record attempt. And yeah, you just see how determined and against all the odds, how well she's done. And it's really inspiring, actually. So yeah, she's definitely up there.
Very good. Great. Let's see if there's any more questions. And then I know you have a stir fry to be eating. Well, here's one I just saw from Christiana. Allergic to legumes. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, legumes, if you can tolerate them, they are fantastic, but you don't have to rely on them. There are definitely other ways to get your protein and other nutrients that legumes would provide. I think, it's important just to make sure that you're getting a variety of foods and making sure you're getting foods from all of the different food groups. So legumes would be one from, the high protein food group. So you could perhaps look at other high protein foods. And some people who can't tolerate legumes can still tolerate like flours from the legume. So chickpea flour, and from chickpea flour, you can make chickpea pasta, for example. And you might still be able to tolerate things like tofu and tempeh, even seitan, if you can tolerate gluten. Lots of nuts and seeds, whole grains. Yeah, it's still very possible, and I would even say easy to get more than enough protein and everything else that you would get. Of course, if you can tolerate them, then they're an incredibly useful food. But if you can't, it's not the end of the world. You can still get what you need from other foods.
Great, thank you. A favorite food for right after running a marathon. I'm trying to avoid that nauseous feeling.
Okay, well, the general advice there is just to have a mixed meal. So, a meal with all of the major food groups in, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Don't hold back on the salt. I mean, don't go overboard, but you need to replenish your sodium after something like that. So, some people, again, it's another scenario where advice differs for different people. So most people have far too much salt. So the advice for most people is to cut back on salt. Most people have way more than the recommended maximum, which is 5 or 6 grams of salt a day. But the advice is different if you've just run a marathon. You need to replenish your sodium. It means that when you're drinking fluids, you'll retain more of it rather than it passing through and excreting it straight away through the urine. So yeah, a mixed meal. If you enjoy a bit of salt, then a moderate amount of salt on that meal as well. But yeah, you want to be replenishing your glycogen stores, so it's important to have the carbohydrates, but you also want to start that recovery process. So make sure you have some proteins in there as well.
Terrific. Well, thank you. You are very, very knowledgeable. It was really fun talking to you.
Oh, well, I've loved it. There's some really great questions there.
Yeah.
I've got some things to look up. I need to look up green coffee versus ground coffee. What was the other one? There was one that I wasn't entirely sure about, but I need to read a couple of books as well.
Yeah. No, you don't. Well, we need to read your book, and now that I know it's on Audible, I actually can. One more question just came in. What should I eat before a rowing race?
Before a what? Sorry.
A rowing race.
Rowing race. How long is the rowing race, I wonder?
I don't know.
They're not always. Yeah.
In a way, all these questions, the answer is going to be plants. It might be different plants, but it's going to be plants.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, for sure.
Yeah.
Typically, if the exercise that you're doing is like 60 minutes or even up to 90 minutes, you don't have to worry too much about your carbohydrate intake before that. As long as you're having, in your meals, a good variation and you're getting some carbohydrate in throughout the day, then that's fine. It's when your exercise is sort of 60 or 90 minutes or more that you need to start thinking about your carbohydrate intake, because anything more than that and you risk your glycogen levels depleting. So you need to make sure they're as sort of complete and topped up as they can be before that event. So a general rule is you can try to have a meal about 3 to 4 hours before the event, containing 3 to 4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight in that time. So again, I can use myself as an example. So I'm about 80 kilos. So about 3 or 4 hours before a race, I might have 240 or up to 320 grams of carbohydrate. And that's a lot. That's a lot of carbohydrates. So in that meal, you probably want to limit how much fat and maybe even protein you're having in that meal. Because if you're having lots of fat sources and lots of protein in there as well, it's going to make it quite difficult to get that really high level of carbohydrate. If you're competing, if this listener's doing their rowing race in the morning, they might not want to have a meal 3 or 4 hours before the race. If their race was at like 8 a.m., they'd have to wake up at like 3 to prepare this meal and have it that far in advance. So if that's the case, then the other option is to have a slightly smaller meal about an hour or maybe 2 hours before the race. So 1 to 2 hours before the race, you could have 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. So again, for me, I'm 80 kilograms. It's 80 to 160 grams of carbohydrates 1 to 2 hours before the event. So yeah, that's a good general sort of guidance for most people for endurance-based events.
Great. So there's a question. Would you have breakfast before a 50-mile race?
How many miles? 15 or 50?
50.
50-mile race. Yeah, for sure. You'd want to top up your glycogen stores as much as possible. So if you're doing an ultra event like that, then you need to think about carbohydrate loading for at least a few days before that and tapering off your exercise. So you're really, maximizing your glycogen stores. Having a meal beforehand, but also really need to be thinking about eating during the race as well, and making sure you're topping up the glycogen stores. For an ultra event like that, you can absorb up to about 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. So you can eat quite a lot to keep you going, to keep those glycogen stores topped up. I think a lot of people really underconsume carbohydrates and energy in general for a lot of events, and it's actually quite a simple remedy to that. It's eating between 60 and 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour during the event as well.
Right. Well, other than to get your book, where else can people find out more about you? Do you like to have them follow you on Instagram, or where do you like to be?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, TJ_Waterfall on Instagram. My website is meatfreefitness.co.uk, and I've got loads of recipes on there and some various science-based information on various aspects of health and performance as well. And yeah, you mentioned the book as well, so I think that's those are the main ones.
Every time I try to let you go, if like 2 more questions come, we'll try to do these quickly. Kathy says, what would you snack on during a marathon or an ultra?
So I mean, bananas are amazing because you tend to get about 25-30 grams of protein in a medium to large banana. So that's really useful, and it provides lots of potassium as well, one of those really important electrolytes. But I know from personal experience and also experience with my clients that having more than 3 or 4 bananas in one race can get a bit sickly, and you start to really not enjoy eating that many bananas. So a bit of variation is useful. Oat bars are brilliant as well. So you can make like a flapjack or a sort of oat bar with nuts and dried fruit in there. Dried fruit on its own is really good. A sports drink can help, and also, like we mentioned earlier, sports gels can be, a useful tool as well. So I like a bit of variation. Is what I would recommend.
And last question, because he has to eat his, remember it's 8 or 9 hours later. What about intermittent fasting? Asks Marcia. How late do you eat your last meal?
It's one of those areas where the science is really growing in this area, and there's a lot of health benefits to having at least a 12-hour fast. So, even if that's trying to finish your dinner at sort of 7 or 8 p.m. and then not eating anything else that evening and waiting through till breakfast. But extending that to 14 or even 16 hours can be really beneficial for health. But again, it's one of those areas where it really depends on your goal. If you're a strength training athlete, then the one of the most important things is to keep sort of encouraging that muscle protein synthesis pathway, that process. And the key way to do that is strength training, but also eating, and to keep stimulating that process throughout the course of the day. So there's, I was reading a very interesting study saying that actually some protein, whether that's in a meal or a protein shake just before bed, if you're a strength training athlete, can help with that muscle protein synthesis process. And it leads to greater increases in muscle strength and size over time. But then, that's not for everyone. If you're not a strength training athlete, then perhaps intermittent fasting could be a useful tool for you to improve various aspects of health, metabolic health, hormone health. It can improve sleep as well. So it depends what your goals are. But yeah, for a lot of people, it can be very beneficial.
Great, thanks. I have to wonder, does TJ stand for Thomas John?
Oh, very close. Thomas James.
Oh, wow. I knew. Okay, good. I like that. I'm AJ TJ. Anyway, thank you so much. You really are very knowledgeable, wealth of information. Very much enjoyed talking to you. And I have all the links below for people to get your book, or if they want to work with you virtually, or just follow you on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I've loved it. And thanks so much for the great questions, everyone.
Yes, it's very, very nice to meet you. And people like your accent, which I do very much. In December, I mentioned before we logged on that I'm doing a whole week of health professionals from the UK. So
that's very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching that.
It's always nice to listen to you. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow when my guest is Laura Ann from Laura Ann's Jam. She makes sugar-free jams, and she's going to be making them in 3 recipes, including a cherry Swiss chard. Do you like greens, TJ?
Do I like what? Sorry?
Greens. Greens.
Greens.
Yeah, greens.
Yeah. Definitely.
Good. Well, that's the right answer. All right, great. Well, take care and enjoy your stir fry. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.